The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, and thanks for joining us this morning to look at ransomware from a hacker's perspective. I'm delighted today to be joined by Atish Patney and Tom Kendrick, who are leaders within the Checkpoint Software Technologies European Threat Prevention team. And they're going to be sharing some latest insights into tactics, tricks, strategies that the hackers are using at the moment to make the most of ransomware and exploit businesses across the globe. So I'll just give you a very quick overview of what we're going to present today. So we'll do a very quick Bytes intro. I will keep it brief, as many of you know as well. A little bit of scene setting on some of the causes of the global ransomware epidemic and what we're seeing out there in the market, before I then hand over to Atish and Tom Kendrick. So they'll be taking us through why it's been a particularly great year for the hackers.inc. Some of the latest ransomware tactics and strategies that are being employed to devastating events right now, and then some best practices and also technology solutions that can help you prepare a solid defence, both on the prevention and the response side to ransomware. And we'll finish with an interactive Q&A, so you can ask any of your questions that you'd like to our audience. To our speakers, apologies. So, a little bit of housekeeping for today's session. Attendee lines will be on mute throughout today's presentation. However, we do welcome questions. We really want to make this as valuable a session for you as possible. So please take the time as they occur to you during the presentation to post them either via the chat or the questions box, and I'll pose them to our presenters at the end. We will keep discussions today to strategy and technology. We won't be discussing commercials on this session. Of course, if there's anything that sparks your interest, please, we do welcome those conversations post-webinar with your Bytes account manager. We will have a recording available, and the slides will be shared with all attendees as well, post-webinar. So you can share that insight within your wider organisation. And lastly, we have a feedback survey at the end of all our sessions. It's just intended to get some feedback on how the sessions were valuable for you and make sure that we continuously improve them as we go. So who are we? Who are Bytes Security Partnerships? So we are an independent security specialist reseller within the Bytes Allied Electronics Group. We've been fully focusing on security for the last 16 years. We are, however, part of a much larger group, an international group, and as part of that, we're able to offer the resources of a global group, but the specialism and a personal approach of the smallest independent reseller. The thing that sets us apart from other resellers out there is really our technical support. We run full suite of technical services for all of the technologies that we install and recommend to customers, including direct-to-engineer support 24/7 or office hours, and that's allowed us to develop really strong commercial relationships with some of the world's leading technologies, so we'll deliver both commercial value and technical insights to our customers. So that's in terms of what we do within where we work. So we work across classic network security and firewalling, through DDoS prevention, access and authentication, mobile security, right across the range and the spectrum of information security, and we work with very different vendors. Within all of those areas, we offer accredited consultancy, technology delivery, we have in-house support, we offer scoping, strategy planning, market assessments and audits, etc. So we really do have a rounded suite of technical services around those technologies. So why are we here today? Why is ransomware such a concern? Well, Wannacrypt aside, which has obviously been hitting the headlines over the last week, it pays, literally. The ransomware is designed to make as much money, as much coin for the hackers as possible. It's effective. It causes massive impact on both the data loss side of things, losing files, but also not being able to access systems in the first place and the actual availability there. And there's very different toolkits available in order for people to, bad actors to run these kind of threats and these exploits. And ransomware as a service, the idea that it's purely commercial, it's no longer idealistic. People are offering themselves out there in order to attack businesses purely for profit and purely, on behalf of other organisations. The volume and the impact of attacks is increasing. Wannacry was quite unique in the fact that its global reach, over 150 countries, businesses were affected, and the impact in the UK was massive. But it's not just this particular ransomware attack, which, as Tish will share later with you, wasn't a particularly sophisticated ransomware attack. When we combine the fact that attacks are increasing, the impacts are increasing, with the fact that there is increasing data breach pressures out there due to the likes of the EU General Data Protection Regulation coming up, which means that the impact of being breached and the impact of data being stolen is higher than it ever was. And because of that, that's why we're talking to customers around the need to understand ransomware, understand the latest tactics, so that they'll be in the best place to prepare for that. So with that in mind, all that it remains for me to do is to hand over to Atish Patney and Tom Kendrick. They're leaders within the European Threat Prevention team at Checkpoint. Checkpoint, as many of you know, are one of our top vendors. We've been working with them as an elite partner. They're top tier for over 5 years, and 10 years before that with a gold partner status. They are a global leader in network security and next generation threat prevention, and Tom and Tish themselves are specialists in looking at anti-malware and anti-ransomware solutions that Checkpoint provides. So they're able, in a really strong position, to share a unique insight into ransomware for you today. So I'm just going to hand over to Tish and start today's presentation, and I'll be back on to do Q&A at the end. Hope you enjoyed today's presentation.
Thank you very much, Shona, for that introduction. So, as Shona described, Tom and I are part of Checkpoint's Advanced Threat Prevention business unit. In today's session, what I'm going to be sharing with you is some of the insight that Checkpoint has put together through the research of various ransomware families. We're going to discuss why ransomware works and what we can expect more of in the coming year or so from ransomware. So to start off with, what is ransomware? The reason I put this up is that actually one of the things we've seen at Checkpoint is that ransomware as a term is not really used to its fullest potential, which is actually worrying because it shows that there are other forms of attack out there. Today we associate ransomware with encryption of data and payment for the encryption of that data. But if we actually look at the true definition of ransomware, we are talking about a piece of malicious code that is designed to block access to a system until a sum of money has been paid. As I said, at the moment, this is centered around data, but one of the things we do believe is that over the coming months and years, it will extend out beyond data. The recent attack to an Austrian ski resort was a good example of a new variant of ransomware where hotel guests were actually blocked in or out of their rooms based on a ransom being paid. And one of the big questions, as Shane said, there's a lot in the news at the moment around a particular ransomware variant, Wannacry. But even before Wannacry, we've seen ransomware in the news a lot. One of the questions I often get asked by customers is this just a new variant of malware and it's just got a lot of hype? Or is this actually a genuinely different type of attack? And is this something we should be treating in isolation? My aim is not to explicitly answer that question myself today. What we want to do is look at some of the key attributes in this presentation so that you can answer that question for yourself and for your organization. So we're going to look at what feeds the ransomware plague and why is it growing so prolifically at the moment. We're going to take a look at the future of ransomware and what we expect is still to come over the next year to 18 months. And then I'll pass over to my colleague Tom Kendrick, who will talk through what you can do to protect against ransomware. And that's not just looking at Checkpoint technology, it's actually looking at some of the best practice advice that you can undertake around ransomware, approaches that other customers have seen successful in dealing with ransomware. And we want to share that with you, regardless of which technology vendor you choose for technology aspects. about looking at having the right practices in place. In terms of looking at the ransomware plague, as Shona described at the start, the best way of doing this is to actually look at it from a hacker's perspective. So I'm now going to put on the hat of the CEO of Cybercrime Incorporated, and I'm going to present to you our keynote speech from our recent cybercrime conference. So people often talk about the future of cybersecurity. What we refer to actually is the future of cybercrime here at the Cybercrime Conference. And if we look at the last year for cybercrime particularly, it was a fantastic year. We launched new product lines. We had new attack variants from over 12 different successful ransomware families, several new worms. We had great success with botnets. Banking Trojans were reused for other form factors. The product lines that we released last year in cybercrime were truly effective. As a result, what we saw was more customers, or what the legitimate side of the industry would refer to as victims. For us, they were customers, and our customer base grew exponentially in the last 12 months. A lot of this was actually fueled by innovation. What we'll show you today is that the key product lines have really developed and enhanced the user experience to really ensure that we can maximize our profit. And that's why the combination of these product lines, the innovation, and customers has led to a significant increase in our revenues from cybercrime over the past 12 months. And further fueling all of this, we've had some excellent press coverage. The marketing team at Cybercrime has been working flat out throughout the year to ensure that our affiliates know about what we do, but we've also received successful notoriety in the public press with various different breaches of zero-day vulnerabilities from the NSA. We've had new forms of ransomware hit multiple countries like Wannacrypt, but we've also had other ransomware families such as CERBER, Locky, GoldenEye, all show real success over the last 12 months. These are brand new families that were not available a year ago. TeslaCrypt was, again, a fantastic product line and well covered for us in the press. And if we look at some of the things that we see in the news, in the US, we've been infecting large-scale computers. Just recently, we received mass coverage in the UK off the back of it successfully attacking the NHS and crippling a lot of infrastructure to put cybercrime at the forefront. We were able to actually successfully shut down Nissan's Sunderland plant, as well as cripple Renault-Nissan's entire email infrastructure across Europe. We were able to get into Telefonica in Spain. And Wannacrypt has obviously been our biggest news story of the year in just the last 2 weeks, where people were predicting huge sums of ransom payments that were about to be made. We were able to spread across multiple countries. And we can't stress this enough that the press coverage we get today creates the success and the future of cybercrime for us in 2017, 2018. If we remember back to 2015, we were only getting coverage inside the IT media. The only people that knew about us were the IT staff within our customers. Today, the CEOs and the CIOs and the financial directors, more importantly, of our customers are now aware of what we do. And what we're seeing is, as a result, business leaders making business decisions about paying for cybercrime penalties, as opposed to IT making decisions based around security. So it's been a very successful year for us in terms of press coverage. And it truly is a great time for somebody to join our organization and be part of the cybercrime organization. And if we look back to our strategy, we've seen a marked change. I mentioned new product lines. We've focused a lot already on ransomware. And the reason is that our more legacy product lines of spams, keyloggers, Trojans, and bots that would traditionally steal data are starting to prove ineffective for us. And the reason is that the data that we steal through these attacks are highly successful at stealing data. The challenge we have is that we have to then monetize that data. And when we steal data and try to monetize it, it is often quite complicated and difficult. Firstly, we have to find buyers for that data. So we have to create a second function within our cybercrime organization to actually find the buyers of data. The second thing is that actually the payment of that for that data is often tracked. Data breaches are often quite prolific in the news media and attract law enforcement because we typically go after a single organization. And as a result, law enforcement is able to investigate that organization and pursue us. So the risk versus reward of the traditional product lines is now diminishing. We see that the high amounts of data are not valuable to us, and the risk that we undertake to convert those into financial gain is simply not worth it. And as a result, we looked at our strategy 2 years ago, and we found a better approach, and that was ransomware. And the reason ransomware is so successful is that we don't have to find a buyer. We know that the person who we are stealing the data from or blocking access to their critical systems is willing to pay to get access or to get the data back. So actually, our customer pays us. The monetization of this is far easier, and that's why ransomware has been so successful for us in the last 2 years, because we've been able to really monetize this attack vector and this product line to unbelievable heights. And if we look at the numbers for ransomware in the last 12 months of 2016, it's estimated that over 40% of large organizations globally were actually impacted by ransomware. So our market penetration has been very significant, considering that 2 to 3 years ago we had less than 1% penetration. And when we look at the number of organizations that have paid, so not the number of machines that or individual users that have paid for decryption, but the actual number of organizations, we see that typically 70% of the infected organizations make a conscious decision to pay the ransom. And what we see is that there's a split between large payment and small payment ransoms. So 20% of the organizations that are impacted are paying over $40,000 in ransom payments, and 56% are paying less than $10,000 in ransom payments. So we're seeing two revenue streams from ransomware. We're seeing the mass payment from large organizations, and we're seeing a healthy run rate business from the smaller organizations. The FBI have actually helped us out in the last 12 months, and they've actually produced some statistics that estimate over $1 billion of ransom payments were made in 2016 in the US alone. If we extrapolate that out globally, we're looking at close to a $1.6 to $1.7 billion industry formed from just one of our product lines that did not exist in such a way 2 years ago. But it's important to remember that this is not the first time ransomware has been deployed. Whilst we're deploying it in anger over the last years, in December of 1989, the fourth founder of ransomware was actually the AIDS ransomware, where 20,000 envelopes with 5.25-inch floppy disks loaded with ransomware were actually mailed out to individuals with a PO box in Panama for checks to be paid to. And we learned a lot back then from ransomware. It didn't take off until the last 2 years because there were some fundamental flaws in the product line and in the monetization. But things have now changed, as we can see today with the various different ransomwares that we've created. Number one, our delivery mechanism has got more efficient. We're now no longer relying on postal systems. We can now digitally send ransomware out via vulnerabilities, via worms, via Trojans, via phishing lures, and of course through attachments inside emails where the end user actually invites us in, which has actually been one of our most successful delivery mechanisms. Indeed, one of the things that we've seen, and Wannacrypt was a real good test case for us, is that by attaching one of our ransomware product lines to existing product lines, such as worms and Trojans, what we've actually seen is that we can reuse those successful product lines without having the issue of monetization that caused them to ultimately not be valuable for us. they can actually be valuable to us as a delivery mechanism for ransomware. The other thing that's changed compared to 1989 is the importance of data. Data back in 1989 was not deemed valuable enough for somebody to pay a ransom on those 20,000 machines. Today, the value of data within organizations is exponential. It's unchartable. As a result, when we encrypt data and we use ransomware for encryption purposes, we see high value in that data, or the end users see high value in that data, and as a result, we are more likely to get a ransom payment. And the same is true for blocking access to systems. But the third biggest change for us is the payment mechanism. We talked about monetization being a challenge for us. We want monetization to be quick and easy. And whilst the delivery mechanisms have been around for about 5 or 6 years, and the importance of data has been there for about 10 years, it's only in the last 2 to 3 years that the payment systems and the payment industry has caught up to where we needed it to be for ransomware to be truly prolific. In the old days, ransoms involved people providing us with unmarked non-sequential bills and cash payments. Today, we don't need to rely on that because of Bitcoin. Bitcoin really has removed the risk for us in payment systems. It's also, it's obviously, as we know, an untraceable, an anonymized transaction mechanism. It's also relatively easy for the customer to actually set up a Bitcoin account or to make payments to a Bitcoin wallet. So we've really got the mechanisms right with Bitcoin. One of the key things we see as a result is that, as I said, the customers can make direct payments to us. And because it's easy and we're not asking for significant sums of money per attack, it's actually highly motivated from a customer's perspective to pay. One of the things we've seen from our research is that if we take an average payment of $40,000 in Bitcoin, so a couple of Bitcoins, the cost of recovering that machine, the total cost of ownership of recovering that machine, including the backups, new hardware, administrator time, disruption to the employee, are fairly similar to the cost that we're demanding for our Bitcoin. So a lot of organizations take an executive decision, not an IT decision, but an executive decision to make the payment because it will cost them the same in terms of recovery, but the time to recover by paying us the ransom is far greater, or it's far less than the time to actually enact their IT processes. And organizations generally are not obliged at the moment outside of the US to report this sort of crime, and as a result, generally there's little involvement from law enforcement, and there's low motivation for organizations to get law enforcement involved. A lot of customers believe that law enforcement simply can't catch us, so it's not even worth their time. Indeed, we're seeing more and more payments, shadow IT payments, off credit cards, where it's not even reported within their own organization. If we look at law enforcement, it's interesting how law enforcement's attitude has changed as well. 2015, the FBI were telling us that you need to pay. You may need to pay if hackers infect the machine with ransomware. Today, they advise businesses not to pay, but despite that, 70% of businesses pay anyway. And the reason that they pay is that they don't trust local law enforcement, even national law enforcement. Fighting an organization like us actually requires international laws, international police forces without jurisdictions and border issues, and it needs international courts of prosecution in order to actually apply any damages to us. And these structures simply do not exist today when fighting cybercrime. And as a result, law enforcement is largely ineffective at stopping us. And again, that's helped reduce the risk for us, and it's allowed us to really spread. One of the other things that we've really seen develop around ransomware is the notion of affiliation programs. One of the things that we really invested heavily in early last year to grow our channels of delivery. And CERBER back in June to August last year was a really good test case again for us getting the affiliate program right. what we actually worked on with CERBER was, messaging to would-be hackers, incentives and promotions to get them to join our ransomware program, and we also worked on some of the commercials and the support mechanisms. And we got some great feedback on the dark web actually from various different attackers who'd actually seen success with CERBER and began to refer us to other attackers as well. And with CERBER and the notion of ransomware as a service, what we're really promoting now is that people don't need to create their own ransomware. We as an organization can put the resource and development into ransomware, and we can create a channel of delivery mechanisms. We can basically act as the McDonald's of the ransomware world and franchise out our ransomware, so that every single ransomware author can use our delivery system and our structure to deliver their ransomware to multiple organizations. We'll even take the victim's Bitcoin wallet and perform Bitcoin mixing to make sure that further attribution can't be done to the author, and we can move money into the author's account, and many times we are the author, but other authors as well, and also into the affiliates accounts. And we played around with the numbers, and what we found to be really successful, CERBER generated close to $1.2 million worth of revenue for us in just a 3-month period last summer, and it generated almost $750,000 worth of bottom line profit for us. What we found is that actually a 40-60 split between us as the author or other authors coming to our platform and 60% to the affiliates who are going out and launching the attack seems to be the right sort of mechanism to incentivize the affiliates and really spread what we're doing and still make it worthwhile for us as an author. What we've also introduced for the affiliates is a referral program. So every time an affiliated threat actor recommends our platform to one of their friends, they will gain an extra 5% in payments of Bitcoins for their next attack. That's on top of the 60% that they're already getting. And of course, we're retaining 40, and in those cases 35 because of the referral program. But it's hugely successful for us as a platform. It's hugely profitable for us and the affiliates, and it's really led to further spread of ransomware. So we've really built the infrastructure around ransomware now. And one of the things we really make sure is that we provide all of our affiliates with tracking information, statistics, so they can see which of their customers have actually downloaded the ransomware, have encrypted machines, have made payments, which is great for future attacks as well, because they can see that the following 20% of their customer base have actually paid for the ransom, which means that that's the first set of organizations they hit 3 months later with the second attack once we create a new ransom. And we've actually looked at some of the geographic statistics. You can see that CERBER was particularly successful for us in Germany and in the United States. The German success, again, was tied off the back of the success we had in early 2016 with Lockheed attacking the healthcare systems in Germany. We had some successful campaigns in Korea as well, and in Southeast Asia, where we saw significant attacks. When we were attacking some of the large organizations there, we saw large payments as well. And we're actually able to track our overall success with CERBER. And we've done similar things with Wannacrypt. What we've seen with CERBER was huge success in the Far East, in Western Europe, in the US, of course, and in South America. What we're seeing is success in large economic hubs globally. The parts of the world that are financial hubs and have high value on their data, and therefore are willing to pay out. And that's really been a success story for us. It's helped us target future attacks better to specific countries, and also look at where we need to provide multilingual support, Germany being a classic example. When we created German language support for our ransom messages, we saw a significant uptake in ransomware in Germany. And one of the things that we've also worked on is support mechanisms for the customers. So for those customers who are struggling with making Bitcoin payments or getting the encryption keys down, we actually provide 24/7 hotlines for them to call us so that we can help them disable their local firewall. We can help them create a Bitcoin wallet to make payments. We have a ticketing and support system so that they know that if they raise a query with us in chat or on email, that we'll get back to them within an SLA'd amount of time. And for those really struggling, we'll also give them tiered support. So we have first, second, and third line support engineers to help the customer decrypt their machine and make payments. And this is driving a good transactional business model with those customers, so they see that when they pay the ransom, they actually get the results that they're expecting. Wannacrypt actually has been an example where that hasn't been the case, but that's largely because it wasn't involving our support systems. So that was what we've had so far in 2016. Where are we going for the and early part of 17? Where are we going for the rest of 2017 and beyond? There are things that we can already see are working. One of the things we found is the more we can actually encrypt backups, Windows Shadow Copy is a good example of this. The more we can actually encrypt backups on machines, the higher the likelihood of the end user or the customer actually making the payment for the ransom, because they have no fallback option. One of the things we found particularly successful is with online backups, such as Dropbox and Google Drive. Quite often the credentials for that backup system are cached locally on the machine. So as a result, once we begin encryption on the machine, it's very easy for us to get to the Dropbox folder on that machine or the Google Drive local access folder on that machine, and then begin encrypting the files in that backup system as well. We talked about the payment programs. We're working on further referral programs at the customer end. So, taking advantage of the customer's own social media, and what the guys at Wannacrypt showed, that lateral movement of ransomware can be very, very successful. So we're looking at ways that an encrypted host can get reduction on their payment by actually recommending our ransomware to several friends and using the power of their own social network to actually spread our ransomware. And if you think about it from a social concept, a potential victim is more likely to click on an email that's come from one of their friends than an email that's come from an outside organization. So if we can get their own colleagues and friends to actually send them the phishing emails and the lures, we're going to have a higher chance of success. And we've also extended out beyond Windows. We've started branching out into Mac environments. We've had 4 or 5 successful ransomwares that exploit the Mac OS, and we're looking at mobile devices at the moment and IoT. And it's actually the mobile and IoT that's probably our most exciting new avenue for ransomware. It goes back to what I talked about at the start with ransomware moving away from just data encryption and moving towards access prevention. If we can actually block somebody's phone and access to their phone, they're highly likely to pay the ransom. Phones have become such an integral part of our daily lives now, and we want to capitalize on that and really get into that end user experience. Cameras, and especially in today's world of home security and home surveillance systems that are largely unpatched, we can actually, if we can start encrypting those cameras, the sense of fear that we can create in a consumer is going to lead to higher payments from consumers as well. Smart watches have taken off so well, and again have been similar to the phone, have become so ingrained into everyday life for the users. Wearable technology is a huge opportunity for us. If we can disrupt somebody's wearable technology, it affects what they do on a day-to-day basis. And we can start, again, similar to cameras, start integrating into other IoT devices such as thermostats. The notion of being able to control the thermostat for a corporate organization means that we can start to damage critical systems such as heating and control systems for data centers. But in the personal space, we can actually start to manipulate people's homes. If we can control the temperature in someone's home and the climate in their home, and actually, quite literally ramp up the heat on a hot day or on a cold day, ensure that the heating system does not come on until they pay their ransom, they're likely to pay the ransom in those scenarios. And my favorite new development that we're really looking at is cars. And as cars get smarter, we're looking at ways to embed ourselves within the IoT of a car. And if we can actually prevent somebody from using their car, they're likely to pay. Again, if you think of the notion of somebody going to work in the morning and they can't actually get to work, they're going to pay for that. In the corporate space, if we can get into the systems that control delivery vehicles, where organizations have SLAs on payments and on logistics, if we can actually disrupt that flow, if we can actually control access to those vehicles, those organizations are potentially in breach of SLAs to their own clients, which are actually large amounts. I know one logistics company that once paid over £11 million in SLA damages to one of their clients because they missed 10 deliveries in a 2-month period. If we can actually create more disruption in that space, those organizations will be willing to pay ransoms in excess of £1 million to avoid SLA payments to their customers in excess of 11 million. So what we're seeing is endless opportunities for business. As I said, it centers not just around encryption, but actually around preventing access to critical systems and preventing control of systems that people come to expect to control in their day-to-day life. So that's what we wanted to talk to you about today in terms of where we're having success as cybercrime and why this ransomware epidemic is set to continue. It's set to go even further than it has. I'll now pass over to Tom Kendrick, my colleague, who can actually talk about what we can do to prevent ransomware. Over to you, Tom.
Okay, good morning, everybody. So what we're going to do is hopefully now take a look at the view from the good guys. Okay, so worryingly, Tish is incredibly good at being the bad guy and playing the bad guy role. So now let's try and see what we can do. Okay, so for those that don't know me, I'm Tom Kendrick. I'm a European threat prevention engineer for Northern Europe. So we cover UK and Ireland. And what we're going to try and look at is how we're able to counteract and kind of react to some of the things that Tish has mentioned in this session so far. Now, one thing I would say is I don't think there is any one silver bullet in IT. Okay, and that's really because in our view, data could be anywhere, you could be anywhere, your information, your users, your staff, it could be in any location. So I think the first thing I want to just kind of highlight is a concept, if you will, of checkpoint infinity. And as Tish was mentioning, as the kind of the avenues the bad guys use and the avenues that these bad guys expand into grows, we need to make sure that whatever we have and whatever we base our security on is a platform that we know will grow, will develop. And with Checkpoint having 20+ years of experience in this industry, we know we're here for the long term. Okay, but our view is really with the architecture that is Checkpoint Infinity. Our view is it doesn't really matter whether this is something in the cloud, on a mobile device, on a traditional network environment. We need to make sure that you are still covered and there is a single consolidated system for all of the logging, the events, the reporting, that everything can come back into. Okay, so really this is our plan, to make sure that we have this one architecture that will cover us for now and also into the future. And for those that haven't seen or haven't been made aware just yet, this is all based around the R80.10 architecture that was released just last week at CPX in Milan. Now, what is it that Checkpoint does specifically to try and counteract some of those areas that Tish has discussed? Well, we have a family. So we have a family of products which we call SandBlast. And with the SandBlast family, we're able to try and cover off and prevent all of those various attack methods that Tish has mentioned. But also, we see this so often with technology. People sometimes try and implement technology when actually there's always a lot of things that we can do that are just good practice. So for example, just educating users that just clicking on every single link that they might see or opening every single email that they might get, that's not always a good idea. Okay, so there is an element of user education that people just need to be aware of some of the issues that they may have with modern cyber attacks and messages and things that get delivered to that user. As we've seen with recent events and as we're seeing more and more at the minute, backing up, patching your environment is good practice. It is required. It is our last line of defense. Okay, now if you look at some of the advice that we have on the blog.checkpoint.com website, you'll see some of the steps and activities that we were able to advise customers as soon as recent events such as the Wannacry event took place. Okay, and again, for many customers, if you had just a basic firewall, if you were blocking certain ports, if you were stopping certain types of file coming in, there's a really good chance that if you were hit, the impact could have been so much more reduced just by doing general good practice. We would also say kind of review policies. Now again, with things like Shadow IT, with the move to cloud and with the expansions that we often have, often we may have a security policy, but actually it may be our internal security policy. What about your cloud security policy? What are the measures in place today for your cloud gateways? So as an example, yes, it's great that we can spin up a machine in cloud in just a few seconds, but can you tell me what access into a Windows machine in your Amazon or in your Azure or whatever cloud system it might be? Can you tell me what access into and out of that machine you have? Does it match your internal policy as well? And again, with all these things, please test whatever you document or you preach. To give you an example, we know that obviously people have their own policies. We know we have policies in place. Just 2 weeks ago, I spent most of my Sunday night and into the mid-morning hours of Monday morning working with a government customer who said, we don't want to be the next people on the list because of what's happened over recent days. We had incident response, we had professional services, we had myself from the European team and local teams as well, with a customer on a WebEx that generally has a very long change process, a very long control and test policy, and this customer was just so scared that within 8 hours we handheld them through, enabling loads and loads of different capabilities. And what it uncovered is when the proverbial hits the fan, people will jump to it. What it further uncovered for us was actually when we say to someone who is responsible for the cloud security policy, who is responsible for this security policy, who's responsible for getting DNS access or firewall access or web access through all of these boxes that may traditionally have not had access because they didn't think they needed it so far to get updates, it opened a whole can of worms. So if you are going to do something, if you are going to say you're going to implement or roll out a technology, make sure you test it and make sure you test the backup plans and the issue plans that you have to make sure you've got those steps that you need if required. Now, obviously there are effective technologies that can address some of these issues. Okay, so just looking at them from a high level, within the SandBlast family, we kind of have a number of different areas that we can work. So we have network and perimeter devices. So we have software that we can enable on our gateways that will give us the protection to stop the bad file coming in the first place across web, across email. Choice is yours. Okay. We have software that can live on the endpoint. And again, the great thing about the endpoint is if you go and work from home, if you go and get a USB stick, whatever it might be, if the malware is written in such a way that it will only ever hit your endpoint because it's looking for your desktop background, we know with this kind of software we can prevent anything bad taking place. We've just launched a product for Office 365. So again, many customers who've moved to 365 who may have solutions there, if they want that extra layer of security to give them protection, we can actually add Checkpoint SandBlast into 365 in just a few clicks. Okay. For the more advanced customers, so for those that have got their own websites, or for those that may have files transferring over a protocol that, for example, that we maybe don't support today, or that is a little bit legacy, we have APIs. So if you can find the file, you can send the file to us, we can give you a clean bill of health. And as Tish mentioned earlier on, we're seeing the move from the kind of traditional impacting of files, but also to that wider breadth of how do we cover the mobile device, because in the mobile device we know there's a lot of sensors, we know there's a lot of data, we know there's a lot of contacts, and we know that that gives us a lot of access into the organization. So this is the breadth over which that we can provide security. Now, if we focus just on kind of, again, recent events, let's look at what we could have done. So let's say that we were the first patient zero in the world. And let's say, for example, that this came from an initial executable that came in that impacted us because of the vulnerabilities that were disclosed, and I had an unpatched machine, so I was vulnerable to the Microsoft issue that let someone gain access to my device. Now, we know that from a user's point of view, we can actually download files maybe from a website. We know we can browse to an infected website. We know we might get sent files on email, or we might get a link to a file. Okay, we might get files in on USB or from the network. Okay, or as we discussed, there may be an OS vulnerability that gives someone access to my machine. Ultimately, with the software that we have, we kind of don't care how you try and get that bad activity or bad event to us. The key thing is what do we do and what can we protect it with and against as it either tries to get there or as it lands on the machine. So again, going back to basics, but we have got things like intrusion prevention. Again, we could have stopped the initial infection because of the Microsoft vulnerability just by making sure you had up-to-date IPS. The day that WannaCry became a big thing in the news, I was looking on VirusTotal, and I can see how many vendors could have protected against the known at the time variant of that file. It was about half. Okay, half of the AV vendors could have done something. Now that's still not great if you're in the wrong half, and it's even worse if those bad guys make a variant. But if it was a simple attack, there could have been something you could have done. We can make sure that you don't go to a phishing site and download anything bad in the first place because of the technologies that we have built into our endpoint PC. So our zero phishing will make sure that anywhere that you go, we will stop that initial phishing link being clicked on and you entering any bad credentials. We've got emulation and we have extraction. So every file that tries to come to the endpoint, every file that comes through the network, every file that you download that comes on USB, what we're able to do is generally we can emulate any of those files. And for certain file types coming over mail or coming over the web channel, where that's a document file, where that's a PDF file, we can clean that file of links, of macros, of code, again, reducing the opportunity for anything going on. We're also monitoring all the traffic through your network and leaving your endpoint. So if that file does get to your endpoint and it tries to call out, we will make sure that the anti-bot technology will kill that connection. But what we've also just added as well is the anti-ransomware feature. Now, what does the anti-ransomware feature do? The goal of anti-ransomware is we want to make sure that regardless of how or what gets to your endpoint, whether it's known, whether it's unknown, we don't care. We want to make sure that we can prevent those things getting to your machine and prevent any damage that may occur, let you roll back any data that may have been encrypted, and also make sure that if you're an existing customer of the SandBlast Agent product or the Complete Security product, you will get this added on for free, or again, you can purchase this as an individual product as well. So how does it work? Well, what are we doing is every time you are accessing files on your file system, we are monitoring any process that is accessing any data file that you define. So again, your documents, your Office files, any important file extension that you want to define, you can define any specific file extension you wish. And if any process other than a legitimate process tries to access that file, we will make a backup. And what we're doing is we're monitoring the machine and seeing if we can see any behavior that makes it look like a ransomware has now been triggered. If we see any activity that we don't like, what we'll do is we'll then start forensic analysis, and we'll track back and understand which processes, which files, which registry changes, whatever it may have been, whatever elements were involved in that infection, we will then offer to you either automatic or manual restoration of your files. Now, because we were backing up your files all the time, as we mentioned earlier, any files that may have been encrypted, those encrypted files are deleted. The processes and the files that the malware dropped all get deleted, stopped, terminated, and what we'll then do is go to our backup area that only we as Checkpoint can access because we have a signed driver that lets us get in there, and we will then restore your files. Okay, so how good is this as a piece of technology? Well, what we've been doing is behind the scenes, again, the software was launched and has been launched for a couple of months, but behind the scenes we actually started to do some testing with our technology just using the anti-ransomware feature. So we had no AV, we had no bot detection, we had no sandboxing detection, okay? And over 6 months we would throw 200 samples daily into our test environment to see what we could pick up. And with that we had a 99.3% catch rate. Okay, now just so you know, yes, obviously it did catch the Wannacry ransomware even before any signatures were made available by AV vendors or by others. Okay, and again, in reality you wouldn't do what we did, which is to turn off all of our other protections first. Okay, this was just a test to see how this engine behaved on its own. So what you can see is, as much as Tish behaves the bad guy and as much as there is bad activity that they may try and do, there are technologies and really simple and basic steps that you can take to stop this happening. So as we come to the summary, what have we seen? Well, we've seen that we'll offer you the highest level of threat prevention, and we do that across multiple layers. Because again, the bad guys can try and get you from multiple layers. We need to make sure that we can prevent the bad stuff across multiple different layers. All of what we have behind the scenes, whether it's something that's happening in SandBlast on the endpoint on the network, whether it's something that's happening in cloud, whether it's something that's happening in a virtual environment, all of this is linked together, fed back to give you the best threat intelligence, which we feed back into Threat Cloud, so that if anyone sees a bad event, we can share the IOCs across all of the Checkpoint family, and all of this is managed and monitored and controlled by Checkpoint Infinity platform. Okay, so the 80.10 platform. Now, again, what we're able to do here is obviously block the known, but we're also able to take what we've learned and turn what was unknown through the sandboxing environment into something that's known, and we're now able to prevent the known and the unknown. And again, across all of these platforms is where we offer our protections. Now, again, if you want to see a little bit more about the inner workings, we've actually got a webinar running on Friday the 26th at 11. So again, if you want to join that, you're more than welcome to register on the link that we've got just on the screen now, or again, just drop Tish an email, so apatney@checkpoint.com. But for now, what we're going to do is just close this session down and open up for any questions that you guys may have, and we'll try and help out.
Thank you very much, Tom, for today's presentation, and thanks very much, Tish, for playing the role of the bad guy, which you do so well. So just want to open up now to anyone for questions. So do please, pop them over to myself via the questions box. I'll pose them to either Tom or Tish, as good cop, bad cop. And then so anything around insights into the Wannacrypt attack, anything around the technologies that we've talked about, etc. Fire across your questions, and I will do a rapid Q&A session with both of today's presenters. So I do have a quick question, first question that's come in from one of our audience. The question for Tom, I think. Where do the snapshot backups get stored with the anti-ransomware? What
we do, so we don't use shadow copy because that's something that we know has been impacted by other pieces of malware, as Tish discussed. What we do is on the local hard disk, we reserve a gigabyte of storage. And as we say, we are looking for files that are being opened or modified not by their default app. So for example, if Word opens a Word file, we actually won't find that interesting. If you want to back that up, you can do. But if something else opens a Word file, what we'll do is we will intercept that request, we will grab that file, and we store it in a protected hidden area, in a hidden folder on the hard disk, which you can only write into or read from using the checkpoint driver. So a signed checkpoint driver is the only thing that can manipulate the contents of that folder. Okay, so again, then anything that wants restoring, again, only we as Checkpoint can go into that folder and restore that file. So it's just a local storage area on the machine, protected by Checkpoint self-protection, and no one else can get any access to that.
Thank you, that's really clear. So I just want to ask anyone else that's got any questions around any of the tactics, etc. Do take those to time to pop them down into the questions box. Make sure that we get those covered. Otherwise, I just want to thank everyone for their time in attending today. I do appreciate that everyone has very busy diaries, and we're really pleased that you hopefully found the session useful and informative in terms of dealing with these threats. I also want to thank Tish and Tom for the presentations today, for going into the insight with us. A very quick reminder for those of you who are our Checkpoint customers. Tish referred to, and Tom both referred to the new launch of RAT.10, which is the latest software release from Checkpoint, major software release. We at Bytes will be running a technical roadshow specifically designed for customers around RAT.10 and some of the latest features, benefits, etc. for you. So do watch out for those invitations to come out very shortly. I'll put that in the webinar synopsis for you. I have another couple of questions that have come in. Firstly, it is around how automated the system is. So I think this is probably one for Tom. Does the Checkpoint system react and deal with threats without any intervention from IT staff? So how much can it be?
So yes, it can. So you obviously define as the admin whether you want us to automatically stop and remediate. But yeah, absolutely, it's designed to be completely self-sufficient if you wish, or it can be detected but manually remediated if you also wish. The choice is yours.
What you say, it's essentially policy-based depending on the company's
you decide. Yeah, you
Okay.
decide whether you want us to automatically or not.
Thank you, Tom. So I have one last question on backups again. Can tape backups be affected?
Not quite sure what
I
asking, Isaac.
assume that's referring to, could tape backups be encrypted?
In theory, the chances are it's more likely that the bad guys would try and encrypt the file locally, which would then be backed up to tape as an encrypted file. So yes, it could in that sense, but it's unlikely that it will be an online backup to tape. Generally, one of the things that we're finding with the creation of ransomware is many organizations now like to have a, shall we say, an offline backup that's a bit more manual, just in case. But yes, you could impact the source files that then would be backed up.
Okay, that's something that if the person who answered that question wants to talk to us about in detail, we can go through that with you sort of offline. So I have a myriad of questions now coming through. So is it centrally managed for the likes of alerts and reporting for admins?
It is indeed. Yep. So all managed from the endpoint manager.
Super. Does the checkpoint system have reporting facilities, and if so, what are the reporting facilities available?
Yep, so as part of the software, you get things, obviously you can tie it into things like smart events if you wish, but obviously as a free feature, you all get smart log. So anything that happens on the endpoint that is taken from the endpoint goes back to the endpoint manager, and with smart log turned on, you'll get to see all of the events and reports defined in there.
Yeah. For the person that does that, is that something that you'd like to have a look at in terms of the reporting? If you're not as familiar with the endpoint manager, that's something we can certainly arrange for you post session.
Yeah, just to follow up on that point as well on reporting, there's two other bits of the reporting that we haven't really touched on today. One is actually the forensics capability that's built into the SandBlast agent on the endpoint, which will provide complete incident understanding as well of not just ransomware but other attacks. So you can actually see how did the attack originate, where did it come from, what were the activities that this particular malware did on this endpoint. But you can then also use that endpoint manager that Tom talked about to actually poll the rest of your endpoint estate for those indicators of compromise. So we can not just see which machine was infected and how it was damaged or remediated, but we can also see what the next potential victims are within the organization.
Okay, so I have another question here around non-checkpoint customers. So what additional infrastructure would a non-checkpoint customer need to run anti-ransomware standalone? Is it
Do you want me to do that one, Tish?
I can cover that one off just to give you a rest, Tom. So SandBlast agent and the anti-ransomware technology, and indeed the whole SandBlast suite, is available to non-checkpoint customers. If you want to look at anti-ransomware specifically, the only cost is the endpoint license for anti-ransomware and an endpoint manager, which is a software-based manager. So you'd need, one manager for your entire organization, and then a SandBlast agent or anti-ransomware agent, sorry, per device that you want to install it on.
Thank you, Tish. That's really helpful. Got another couple for you. I'm just going to take two more, and then any other questions, please do send them across to me, and I'll make sure that I send them to our presenters. Does the manager show what's happening at the time of an attack? I.e., show what files are infected?
Yes, it does.
So that's that forensics piece that I was referring to, showing us what we'll do as part of when we send these slides out. We'll also include a sample forensics report of Wannacrypt, so you can actually see the full attack flow, the time of attack, the files that are infected, all those sorts of things. That's part of the standard reporting capability that we provide within the SandBlast agent.
Thank you, that would be really useful. I'll make that available to everyone as well as the person who asked the question. So I have a more of a theoretical discussion point here for one of our questions. I thought it would be very relevant to finish on today. What are your thoughts on the long-term time bomb of ransomware affecting long-term backup retention, and how can companies mitigate it? I'm hoping I've got that question right in terms of that's what the person who asked it.
So I can handle that one. So the idea of two bits of the software, both the forensic software and the anti-ransomware software, they have long history in mind. Okay, so for example, we can store easily 30 to 60 days worth of history on what's happened on an endpoint. So if, as you say, there's a kind of a time bomb that says I will only detonate after X weeks or X months, as long as it is on the endpoint, it will detonate. Obviously, if it's on the backup tape cannot be run, the file on the backup tape cannot be run until someone would manually remove it back to a real machine, at which point the software again would see it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. So thank you very much, everyone, for all those questions. Thank you very much for staying on the line for the Q&A. I'm conscious that we went a little over time, but obviously it's such a hot topic that I think there's a lot of different questions and answers to be provided. Thank you, Tom and Tish, for your time. We'll be making the recording available, the endpoint forensics report that Tish referred to available post-session, and do look out for the RAT.10 technical roadshows that are coming up to, if you are a Checkpoint customer, to see the latest version in action tested by a technical team. Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.